Welcome back to Data Science at Home podcast. I'm Francesco, podcasting from the office of Amethyx Technologies based in Brussels City, Belgium. And today, Belgium, and in particular Brussels, is pretty dark. I think we're already getting into winter, it looks like, out of the window there. For those who are still on holiday, just bear in mind that Belgium is always one season ahead. Well, we are back with the Data Science at Home podcast, and today I would like to go full boomer mode. For those who understand what I'm talking about, well, it's gonna be, you know, speaking about the past, and of course, I don't want to be the old folk who always claims that things from the past are better. But as a matter of fact, the internet was better. And that's exactly the topic of the day. I'm going to speak about what the internet was, at least what was my experience of the internet, and actually what happened in like the last 30 years. Now, before you roll your eyes, stick with me because this is actually about your future. It's not just, a nostalgic rambling about, the good old days when things were more, I would say, democratic, even though this word today doesn't have a lot of a meaning. And I would like to dive into two quite interconnected topics that will make you question everything about modern tech culture. And because a lot of things are happening, and not only with AI, of course, as a matter of culture, the culture, the internet culture is changing, has changed a lot. And the new kids in the room, of course, don't exactly know what I'm talking about because they were not there. The generation of, the 80s, 70s for sure, the 80s even more, which is my generation, I think we are the last generation that actually saw both worlds. Now, everyone from a generation tells this. Even my father told this on many aspects of life. But yeah, this is my turn probably. So I'm gonna explain why I think the hacker culture, for example, died and what replaced it, which is exactly the not only the topic but also the title of this episode: how hacker culture died and what replaced it. So in this episode, I will try to answer that. Plus, I would like to quote unquote write, even though I'm not going to write anything today, a love letter to the old web. And I know what you're thinking. Another old guy complaining about how things used to be better. As I said, yeah, maybe, but they actually were, at least when it comes to the internet, and understanding why I think matters more than you think. And it probably matters more to the new generation than the old one, because the old one knows what the internet was. They were there. So grab your hopefully handmade coffee and let's time travel to an era when hackers were actually heroes and not villains, how they let us believe in Hollywood movies. So let's start first, with the first question that will definitely trigger many of the listeners out there. What do we even mean by hacker culture? Because somewhere along the way, we let Hollywood and the media, especially the media, completely hijack this word, shading a very bad light on this word, which is not bad at all. It's not supposed to be bad. And so today, when people hear the word hacker, they think of some, hoodie wearing antisocial kid breaking into banks or Russian agents manipulating elections and stuff like that, which is exactly what happened. As a matter of fact, these are real things that happened and still happen and will always happen. But when I speak about hackers, I speak about the culture behind hacking. The original hacker culture, as now is probably older than myself, or as old as myself, around 40-ish years. And that was something entirely different and I would say even infinitely more beautiful. Now, Real hacker culture actually was born in the 60s, so 20 years before I was born, at the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, right? And it was a culture, and as any culture, it was about curiosity, it was about elegance. We're gonna cover this. It was about the pure joy of making things work. So hackers were actually the people who would spend 3 days or more optimizing a piece of code just because the inefficiency bothered them. And I'm gonna refer to the term hacker in software engineering and software development, of course. But you can apply this concept to pretty much anything. Wherever there is curiosity, elegance, and the joy of making things work, it can be politics, it can be economy, it can be social science, it can be many aspects of life. But of course, I will tackle the part of software engineering and development, software development, because that's what I do. Now, these folks were the ones who believed information should be free, right? These were the folks who shared knowledge openly and who built things not because they were paid to, but because the problem was interesting to them, and so they decided to do it to solve that problem. And sometimes, yes, it was also about getting the credits in a community that was very meritocratic, and so getting credits for something that was an open problem or was known to be a difficult problem, well, that was something which I think is a genuine thing that many people should be doing even now. Now, I have the lack of still dealing with some of these folks today, not necessarily my age. I still have hopes for this society when I speak to these folks. And with this, I want to say that to be a hacker or to embrace the hacker culture, you not necessarily need to be an old fart. Young folks can definitely be that, and there are many out there, thank God, because they embrace that culture, and that's a very nice thing to see. Now, the hacker ethic was very simple back in the days, which was, well, first of all, access to computers. And again, I'm referring to the IT world and the world of software development. And of course, anything that might teach you something about how the world works should be unlimited, should be total. So all information should be free. This was the ethic. You should mistrust the authority and promote decentralization, not in the blockchain terms, those are bullshits, in terms of information and power. And of course, you need to judge hackers by their hacking and not by other, stupid criteria like degrees, age, race, or position, which is exactly what's happening today. Or well, it's been happening for a while now. Uh, Even this might sound radical to you, and it should. This culture, to put things in perspective, is the same culture that gave us Unix, that gave us the internet, the internet capital I. It's the culture that gave us open source software, you know, and basically every piece of technology that you are using, even right now, to listen to this podcast. TCP/IP being one of them. TCP/IP is basically the core of the internet, right? It comes from that culture. And then, of course, something happened, something quite ugly and quite corporate and soul crushing, I would say, which brings us to the death of the hacker culture. Now, I can be pointing my fingers to many actors here, and I will. The first nail in the coffin was commercialization, right? The moment that technology became big business, the hacker ethics started dying. This is my personal opinion, of course, by having been there and by observing what's going on, and being in during that transition from when the hacker ethic existed to when it didn't, or it stopped existing. So the moment technology became this big business, this money machine, I think that the hacker ethics started dying. And suddenly, sharing code, for example, wasn't virtuous anymore. It was kind of a threat to your startup's competitive advantage, right? The collaborative spirit that built the internet, in fact, was replaced by non disclosure agreements, trade secrets, patent trolls, and you name it. Now, those who look at Bill Gates, for example, as the good heart, generous grandpa today, they should better reconsider their judgment because this guy was kind of an asshole back in the days. I like Bill Gates. I respect him because he did a lot of things that we still benefit from in terms of culture, not in terms not of the operating system he built. That's I never liked that shit. But that's not the point. Um, it started a movement, that's for sure. But back in the days, it was brutal, and together with Microsoft, it kind of contributed to killing the agriculture that I'm talking about. Now, think about Netscape, for example. The new kids don't know what Netscape is or was. It was a web browser when there was no Google Chrome, and in fact, there was no Google at all. Uh, and Microsoft decided to, wipe the competition by, you know, adding the web browser to the operating system. And, you know, this is not allowed it with the laws of the day. Back in the days it was, but then it was stopped. It was stopped, of course. You couldn't do that. Um, Now, to be very honest, the question of whether Bill Gates contributed to killing hacker culture is a very complex fact, and you know, it touches on a significant tension in computing history between commercialization and the origin of collaborative programming, for example. Bill Gates, as a matter of fact, was actually part of early hacker culture himself. Um, Bill Gates and Paul Allen, for example, they were used to hack their school's computer systems at Lakeside. Um, there are several biographies of Bill Gates. I really advise to read one because there's very good stories in there, and they are true. Now, this apparently helped these two youngsters to meet girls, who apparently were amazed by folks like these. Uh, Seriously, where are these girls today? uh, but in any case, his later business practices with Microsoft, it did represent kind of a shift away from some core hacker values that he embraced when he was younger. And that was due to, indeed, the commercialization, to the fact that Bill Gates stopped being a developer. He was a very good software developer, not like Steve Jobs, who couldn't write a line of code. Um, when he stopped doing that and he started being an entrepreneur. And, this is the empirical fact, empirical proof that when you change perspective, you also change your ethic behind what you're doing, right? Or you stop embracing the things that you were embracing until you became an entrepreneur because you are subject to other dynamics. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like the fact that the internet changed because of this, you know, big business looking at software as a business rather than a culture. Now, the original hacker culture emerging from places like MIT's AI lab in the 60s and 70s was built around principles, as I said, of free information sharing, collaborative development, and the belief that code should be openly accessible for tinkering and improvement. And Bill Gates never opened that code. You know what I mean? Quite the opposite. He was very cautious and very attentive to keep it closed. The Microsoft Windows kernel, was never released. It stayed a proprietary operating system. It still is. Now, as the computing industry became more commercialized during the 80s, the agriculture was, as a matter of fact, marginalized as the passion for tinkering and having fun that had predominated in earlier communities of computer programmers. and gave the way to more, profit-driven motives. So Gates' approach with Microsoft embodied this commercialization trend. The company's focus on proprietary software and closed source code, and of course, aggressive business tactics, it literally killed the competition. It brutally assassinated competitors, right? I mean, not physically, from a business perspective, obviously. Now, to be fair, it's important to know that Bill Gates didn't single handedly kill the hacker culture. It was actually part of a broader industry transformation, as I said. Hacker culture evolved and found new expressions through the free software movement, which was led by Richard Stallman, and more on that probably in another episode. Um, the open source movement and communities that continue even today, to exist and to, they are very active actually, thank God. While Microsoft's proprietary model did represent a departure from hacker ideals, the culture itself adapted and persisted in different forms. So while Gates' business model contributed to commercializing computing in ways that conflicted with the traditional hacker values, I would say that calling it killing the culture overstates his individual impact on what was really a complex industry-wide transformation. And again, I'm mentioning this because I point my fingers towards the, probably the category, of people that I detest the most, which is VCs and HR, probably VCs more, um, because these folks, they polluted the technological world many, many times for many decades. Now, of course, I'm not generalizing. There are always, good VCs in the world. Uh, I'm speaking about the trends and the big numbers, and the big numbers tell a different story than, the exceptional VCs. They have the tendency to create a hype, to um, encourage a hype for the sake of, these crazy valuations of whatever they have been investing in, and then, hope in an exit, or, sell the potato to some other jerk who's gonna buy for 10x the price. And this dynamic, which is indeed very lucrative, has very negative consequences onto the into the IT community and the community of software developers, because things that should not even exist receive millions of dollars or euros, probably dollars more, and they all of a sudden, establish themselves in a market and make it because someone decided so. It was not the real quality and the real need and necessity of that particular product that actually made it, but it was like a big push, a big marketing push, and a big VC push. And VCs are always the puppet masters behind these dynamics, and that's terrible. I already spoke very badly about VCs in another episode. I will report the link in the show notes of this one on the official website datascience@home.com. And in that episode, I give you the TLDR. Majority of VCs do not understand shit of what they are putting their money at. They just go with the trend. They look around, and if other investors, maybe the key players, are doing something, they also make their move. But they're actually not understanding what the fuck is going on. And this is happening, this is so evident and so, clear with AI and these large language models that pretend to be AGIs and all this nonsense that people say. And, VCs keep, putting money at work and keep hyping the train because, they are on that train, right? So the second nail is the cult of entrepreneurship. Now, don't get me wrong. Entrepreneurship can be great, and it is great, but when every computer science graduate started seeing themselves as the next Steve Jobs instead of the next Dennis Ritchie, we lost something essential. Now, for those who don't know who Dennis Ritchie was, um, is the guy who created the C programming language, the Unix operating system, the B language with his colleague Ken Thompson, and many other things that I'm not here to, you know, explain. So Wikipedia, Dennis Ritchie, if you don't know who the guy is. If you know who Sam Altman is and you don't know who Dennis Ritchie is, shame on you. So get some culture and try to remember who Dennis Ritchie is and try to forget who Sam Altman is. Or Scam Altman. Now, the focus shifted from how can I solve this elegant technical problem to how can I build a unicorn startup, right? Sounds familiar? This is what is happening it's been happening for, I don't know, the last 20 years, a bit less. In the last 10 years, a lot more. We have seen this kind of exponential growth of this, type of thinking, which is pathetic, right? Uh, because it's all about money. It's just about that. Now, the third nail is the security theater that followed 9/11. It's already 20 years, and various cyber attacks. Suddenly, curiosity became suspicious. Uh, Poking around systems to understand how they work became criminalized, in fact. And that was kind of the very essence of hacking. So all of a sudden, the essence of hacking became a crime. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act turned exploration into felonies, especially in the States. And many other slave countries followed, of course, that. Now, the final nail would be definitely social media and the attention economy. This is probably the worst because it's the most subtle one. The quite deep work that real hacking requires became impossible when everyone needed to constantly broadcast their achievements or bullshits or likes and follows. Does this sound familiar again? So, all these things happen in the years, in the decades, and these are the fingers that I'm pointing at. This is in my opinion, my personal opinion, these are the four top reasons why the agriculture disappeared, or well, it was definitely mitigated by a margin. Now, what replaced the old good hacker culture? So, what filled the vacuum? Well, we got several things, and in fact, none of them are particularly inspiring. I'm just mentioning them for the sake of this episode and this conversation with myself and a bunch of other folks who could not be at the beach. um, Now, first we got hustle culture, right? The toxic productivity obsession that treats every side project as a potential $1 billion exit, right? Seriously, guys, you should stop doing this bullshit. These aren't hackers. They're just founders who happen to code, right? And then we got, the influencer developers, people who spend more time creating content about coding than actually coding. They optimize for engagement metrics, okay? They don't optimize for code elegance or for, how interesting a problem truly is. I think there is only one guy that I want to mention who can actually do both, at least the one I know. He's not sponsoring this episode. I'm being genuinely true about this. He has a Twitch channel. I'm gonna report his link in the show notes of this episode. TS Oding or Soding, whatever. It's like coding but Soding. I don't know if I mispronounced, but he does live coding sessions, and I think he's one of the best programmers I've ever met online. He's very elegant. He has these brilliant solutions. Also, the way he types code, the way he reasons about it, it's like it's unique. I love him. I mean, he's a very nice guy, and I think that's kind of an exception because those who understand or can understand the elegance in what he does, of course, they follow him, but not the other way around. Like majority of all the others is just marketing machines. They are like influencers, like the same as I don't know, those who paint their nails online. something like that. It's the equivalent of that, majority of them. So they just, count how much engagement they have, how many likes they got, how many followers they have, and stuff like that. And Twitch, unfortunately, is quite full of those folks. The other thing that I want to mention is a shift in the mentality. Move fast and break things. The move fast and break things mentality, which I believe comes from Silicon Valley, which is clearly, the heaven of startups and the place where things happened, where all the things that I'm mentioning actually happened, especially because it's the VC heaven. It's where all these dynamics take their maximum inspiration. And that's the place where, this kind of new mentality arise, which is move fast and break things, which is basically the opposite of the hacker culture, if you think. Because real hackers cared about craftsmanship. They wrote code like they were composing poetry, right? And today's disruptors write code like they are doing graffiti in a subway, right? Because they have to do fast, very fast shit, break things, and start over, and then start another episode or another streaming and get more likes. And finally, we got algorithmic culture, where what gets built is determined by recommendation engine, suggestions by algorithms, and not actual human curiosity. So we stopped exploring the unknown and started optimizing for what the machine tells us people want, right? And that's quite sad. And probably Facebook was kind of the, if I want to point a finger to someone here, I think that, the last 20 years, Facebook has been the main actor or the main puppet master of this kind of culture. And of course, last but not least, don't forget about that. AI, vibe coding, and all that crap, right? Seriously, I don't know why people are so excited about this vibe coding bullshit, but I've expressed my thoughts and my opinions about vibe coding a number of times. And to the new kids, I say, don't even consider that nonsense. Just, head down on your book or online tutorial, whatever. Learn the fundamentals of a programming language, the one you like, whatever. Don't use AI to code. AI cannot code. It never will. It will just keep vomiting what other people have been writing and published online. And they are not even aware that there is some machine learning model learning from their code, which might be mistaken and it might contain errors. So kids, please don't do vibe coding. Vibe coding is for losers. Be a real man or a girl. Be a real coder. That's it. We have to be gender equal, right? All right. What's the result of all this shit? That we have more developers than ever, but fewer hackers. And that's sad again. We have more code than ever, but less innovation. And that's also sad. We have more tech leaders than ever, but less actual leadership. And as a European, I am entitled to say this. Our leadership sucks. But no politics here. I promise to stay on the IT and software development topic, so I'm gonna skip this. Okay, can I go back? Can I take it back? Probably not. I will not cut this. Now, with AI, this situation has been amplified by a million, and it will be even more. That's why Scam Altman wants you to use that shit, because they want to keep changing that culture. Believe me, that is not good at all. Do not embrace what the words of these people. These people are scammers. Now, there is one thing that I want to talk about in this episode, which is something of which I'm really nostalgic of, which is the place where I learned a lot of things. which is IRC. And this is kind of a love letter to the whole web because, you know, IRC was like part of my life when I was a teenager. Um, and, I would really like to dedicate a space to this masterpiece of a protocol and software. So please let me get really sentimental for a moment and talk about something I genuinely miss. One of the most important vehicles that hackers used to communicate back in the days, one of the most efficient ways many folks, and especially myself included, of course, um, they used to stay up to date and talk with communities and directly also with the authors of the software they were using or dealing with. So, it's an acronym. IRC stands for Internet Relay Chat. For the kids who don't know what IRC means or was, it's kind of something like Slack or Discord. Um, it's kind of the grandpa of Discord and Slack. Let me put it like that. In fact, IRC was born in 1988. It still exists, though. I still hang out sometime on some channel. Um, so it was born in 1988. I was 7, and I got my first PC in the same year. And I remember that in the beginning of the 90s, so for the first 2 years, after I got my first PC, we didn't have internet at home. So my mom was not into, my parents were never into that technology stuff. So they were always against, me being online, and internet was like, no, don't go there. There is bad guys there. You're going to get a criminal, stuff like that. I come from southern Italy where, people were very, and still are very tech adverse. Now, it was a real-time chat protocol, okay, that connected people across the globe. Now, of course, the globe was like quite unpopulated world. There were not so many people online, at least not as many as today. There was no emoji, there was no voice messages, there was no video calls, there was just text, okay? Just pure, unfiltered human thought transmitted as text at light speed. Well, not really, at 56 kilobit per second, if you were lucky. And now, why IRC was so special? Well, it was completely decentralized, so no single company owned it. No algorithm decided who could talk to whom. No terms of service could ban you from existence. Okay? Well, about that, you could still be banned by operators, which were people like you or people, more grown up who were on that channel way before you or probably started that channel. It was the internet as it was meant to be, a network of peers, right? Not subjects bowing to platform overlords. That was IRC was. Now, IRC also had its own culture, right? And that's very interesting. It had its own etiquette, its own unwritten rules. You didn't just join a channel and start talking. You lurked first, you absorbed the vibe, you understood the community, and and then you could talk. It was very classist. Respect was earned through knowledge and contribution. It was not earned by follower counts. There were no followers. There was no concept of followers and likes. Nobody gave a shit if you were a celebrity because there was no way to understand that you were a celebrity. There was a way to understand that you were a knowledgeable person because what you wrote before. And the conversations were also very different because of this very feature. So there was, by not being likes and shares, people actually listened to each other. They could debate, and these debates could go on for hours or days, right? With participants actually changing their minds when presented with better arguments. Now, another thing is the technical discussions. And this is something that I treasure the most because I learned a lot from IRC and from certain channels because of the quality of the technical discussion. These were the places where protocols were born, where standards were hammered out, uh, where the future of computing was actually decided by the people who actually understood the technology, and many times these were the same people who actually built it, they implemented it. So, this was the place to be, really. Now, of course, there were good parts, bad parts, as always. The good part is that IRC was very democratic. It was very meritocratic as well, genuinely global. I had deeper conversations with strangers on IRC than I had with my colleagues later in my career. The signal to noise ratio was incredibly high because trolling took actual effort. Not like today that you have bots and it's easy to spam or troll people. There were many ugly things though of IRC. It was intimidating for newcomers. The learning curve was kind of steep, especially for new kids. And yes, there were also quite some toxic communities. Definitely nothing compared to modern social media or X in the last few months. Non-technical people, as I said, were not really welcome unless they shut up and they just lurked and listened. But also people, not technically prepared, like skilled at, entering a channel and setting their nickname and stuff like that. Like now things are a lot easier, of course. Now, of course, the least technical people could not join in the sense that they could join, but the barrier was pretty high for them. And this is a pity because it means that we probably lost diverse voices and perspectives. So it was kind of a selected community where people were kind of eating each other's tail. Now, IRC died because convenience killed community. Slack made workplace chat pretty and corporate friendly. They literally copied the idea of IRC and it made it look nicer. Discord was the first, if I'm not wrong, that added voice channels and made gaming communities easier to manage. And then, of course, WhatsApp and Telegram and many, many others that came out, they brought messaging to mobile. But in gaining convenience, we lost something quite profound, which is agency. So on IRC, you chose your server, you chose your client, you chose your experience. While today, Discord decides, for example, what features you get. Slack decides how your data is stored, where that data is stored. WhatsApp decides what messages you can send and stuff like that. So back in the day on IRC, you were the owner of the full experience. And in fact, you could also use whatever client you wanted because the protocol underneath was like a standard. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that we traded digital sovereignty for user experience, and most people think it was a good deal. And I'm not so sure. So what comes next? Well, I think that we are already seeing the early signs of a kind of a renaissance, even though it's quite a weak one. The indie web movement is growing. It's just a lot more difficult to find. Decentralized protocols like ActivityPub, for example, are gaining traction, even though an extremely slow pace. Developers are rediscovering the joy of building things for their own sake and not for venture capital. Please don't do that. Don't follow the VCs. Build something because you want to, or because you have fun, you enjoy doing it, not because someone is promising you millions of dollars. Because that pollutes the culture. I know dollars are always appealing, but there are better jobs, believe me. VCs are pure evil, and they proved that many times in history. So avoid them like a disease. Unless, of course, you have something in your hands that is that requires a push that already generated revenue, for example, I probably gonna have an episode about, when to raise if you want to raise. Raise when you need. I mean, I open just a bracket and close it immediately. Raise if needed, not because, don't build a startup because you have to raise. I don't find it appealing. Probably you want to raise when you already have some income and some revenue and you want to scale. But, that's not the idea with the modern VCs. But anyway, close the bracket. Now, here's my prediction. Well, prediction is a big word. I don't make predictions. I just have opinions about what I think can happen. It's not really a prediction. It makes sense to me as a personal point of view. I think that the next wave will not just be a return to the old ways, right? It's not going to happen. It will be something new that combines the best of hacker culture with the accessibility of modern platforms. But we have to be very cautious about modern platforms that they don't set their limits and especially their conditions onto the same hacker culture that wants to access them. We'll get the curiosity and craftsmanship of the old hackers with inclusivity and reach of today's tools. That would be ideal. Will it happen? I don't know. I wish it happens. Now, the key is remembering what we lost and why it mattered. And especially explain these things, explain what we lost to the new kids because they never experienced that. And they don't know how to make a comparison between what is the internet today and what is the internet what was the internet 20 years ago. In a world increasingly dominated by AI and algorithms, we need human curiosity more than ever, for example, because that was what the internet culture and hacker culture was about. We need people who tinker and explore and ask, what if? Not because it's profitable, but because it's interesting. That's the type of the hacker culture that I expect, and I wish that this new generation embraces. And maybe we need to bring back some of that IRC energy. Probably bringing back IRC, it's going to be quite hard. I believe that there are still some nostalgic out there still using it, but it's more about the energy, IRC energy, the willingness to have long, thoughtful conversations with strangers who might teach us something new, right? And sometimes, yes, having the patience of sitting down and listen to some folks who might know something more about you, more than you, and have the patience to listen and to understand what they have to say. That's, I think, what this generation is probably lacking. At least that's what I wish also for the future. That's all for today's episode of Data Science at Home. If this triggered some nostalgia or if you think I'm completely wrong about everything, of course, let me know. You can find me on the usual platforms. Of course, Discord. There's no IRC channel, unfortunately. We should start one. I'm considering that now. Anyway, datascienceathome.com is the official link. And at that page, you find also all the other links that you need. We have a newsletter free of charge, and we sporadically send some emails once in a while. It's not regular at all, but it's quite interesting, I think. Of course, I'm biased when I say this, but give it a shot. We're back next week with another episode. This was Francesco reminding you that in a world of artificial intelligence, human curiosity is still our greatest superpower. And guess what? It cannot be replaced. Speak soon!